kind. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Susanna Lawson. I'm CEO and co-founder of OneFile. There are people on the line that aren't OneFile customers. So for those of you that don't know OneFile, we're an EdTech platform. We're based in the centre of Manchester, primarily for post-16 vocational training. So our customer base is exactly the ones that these series are aimed at. So colleges, universities, training providers and employers. We've got over 700 training providers or deliverers using OneFile to deliver their vocational training. So it's just over the last few months since lockdown, I've been hearing such fantastic stories about how people have pivoted their delivery whilst we've not been able to go out and see the learners. So we just wanted to share some of that amazing good practice with you all, which is what the panels are about today. So on the panel today, we've got Paul McGrail from Myerscough College. And we also have from Exeter College, Sue Bright and Mike Blakely. So what I will now do is I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and they will be introducing themselves and then we'll get into the panel discussion. We'll be going for about 45 minutes. If you have anything that you want to discuss or chat or ask questions, please use the chat box. And for the last sort of 10-15 minutes, we'll try and get through as many questions as possible. There is a hashtag, Reimagine with OneFile. It's on the bottom right of the screen. So if anyone's on social media and wants to share any of the insights or the discussion today, please feel free to do so. So let me just stop sharing my screen. Okay, Paul, shall we start with yourself? Do you want to introduce yourself and the college?
Okay, I'm Paul McGrail. I'm the assistant principal at Myerscough College, which is just north of Preston. We're a land-based college, probably one of the biggest providers of land-based apprenticeships in the UK. I've been there for 21 years, and we've been using OneFile for 12 years, 3 months, 2 days, I think. And I'm currently in day 110 of COVID lockdown.
Wow, fantastic. Okay, Mike and Sue, would you like to introduce yourselves in the college?
Am I going to go first, Sue? I guess
you are.
So Mike Blakely, Director of Apprenticeships and Employer Engagement at Exeter College. So I've got oversight of our 1,500 or so apprenticeships in learning, predominantly regional based, but we've picked up some national work recently through some of our large level organisations, and real focus here in terms of quality delivery and support over the last sort of 3 months or so to ensure our learners and employers feel as though we're here to get them through these challenges. Sue, over to you.
Hi, I'm Sue Bright. I've worked at Exeter College for approximately 18 years, initially part of the delivery teams. I'm now the operations and quality manager, so I get the lovely job of going around all our faculties and seeing all of our skills team, meeting lots of our apprentices, and also being key in putting some of the systems that we have in place to make sure that we have a quality provision for both the learner and our skills team.
Fantastic, thank you guys. We just had some more people join, so I've just explained at the beginning, if you aren't speaking, if you could be on mute, that would be amazing. And if you're okay turning off your videos, just because we're expecting like nearly 200 people on, so I don't want people's bandwidth to be impacted by the videos. And if you've got any questions or join in the chat, please use the chat facility, and we'll be taking questions in the last 15 minutes. And there is a hashtag Reimagine with OneFile. Okay, Paul, if we could start with you then. Obviously a land-based college, and you've been using OneFile, like you say, counting down the hours since you've been using it, and you were one of our very first customers. So one of the big obstacles that we come up with, or we used to come up with, was, well, if our learners aren't doing an office-based computer sort of fronted apprenticeship, how can they use technology? So how does a land-based college become so innovative?
Okay, we've used mobile technology right from day one prior to actually getting OneFile, and that was one of the big drivers, because we were using mobile technology but with a paper-based portfolio, so the transition for us was obvious to move over to an e-portfolio platform. So we've used all sorts of technology over the years, and use of iPads and iPhones, which is quite current for us at the moment, is sort of second nature, really. We don't really have an issue within the workplace environment. Like you say, we operate in quite remote locations. Could be on a farm, could be anywhere out in the sticks. And OneFile, its applications, the fact you can do things online, you can synchronize it later and things like that, works really well for us. So we've not really had any challenges in that respect. It's worked quite seamlessly, and the same applies to go into COVID. I've got quite an agile workforce. Apprenticeships is quite a directorship on its own within MySco, so we've operated almost like a private training provider within a college and embraced that technology over the years, and it's worked really well. And learners really embrace it, and probably employers embrace it even more than that, to be honest, and not really been a barrier.
Okay, fantastic. So Sue and Mike, how did your team respond at the beginning of lockdown, and how, you know, that their delivery was going to have to change?
We very quickly set about sort of working on three major principles, really. One was maintaining high quality learning and delivery, and we probably had a 10-day period of preparation where all of our team went through a really steep learning curve in terms of understanding the technology, the links between internal systems and the OneFile portfolio, and how best we can engage with those particular individuals. The second theme that we explored was around good quality assessment and engagement with those apprentices in the workplace. It was really important that reviews became as meaningful as they've ever been. We recognised that the students were going to be under a lot of pressure, periods of uncertainty, a general sort of national nervousness was upon us, and it was important that we maintain that contact. So we instantly instigated a 2-week light touch engagement strategy and shortened our formal reviews to every 6 weeks, so that apprentices felt well connected, and also allowed us really to monitor who was in a furlough period, who potentially was at threat of redundancy, whether there was any closed door situation, and in a couple of instances, any learners that needed a break in learning. And the third theme that we explored was around excellence in customer service. So I think the growth of the college around apprenticeships over the last 5 years, at the heart of that really has been our approach to employer engagement. So we wanted to make sure that employers felt well supported. So we literally over a 7-day period contacted every employer, spoke to them about what we were here to do and how we were able to support them, and made sure that every conversation was meaningful, but also that they understood that despite the fact that the doors were closed, we were well and truly open. So if they had any concerns at all at that point in time, they could engage with us either via the phone or through emails, and just did our absolute best really in terms of making sure that we had a settled period whilst the turbulence was around us. I think the biggest challenge of it all was that very steep learning curve in terms of understanding new ways of working. I think as a sector as a whole, we've always had aspirations to do things in a slightly different way, and this created a huge momentum, I suppose, in terms of short and sharp learning to understand actually some of those aspirations that we've already had, and we identified a number of, I suppose, key mentors within that area. The assumption is everybody's ready for it. The reality was there were a few staff who were really fearful of engaging in the new technology. So actually finding those friendly faces and those supportive people to help them along in those early days was a really key part of that. But absolute scrutiny of data as well, making sure you absolutely know who you're working with, what their status was, and lots of conversations between us all really to keep us all in the loop until we found that settled period, which was probably about 3 to 4 weeks in.
Fascinating. So Paul, what did the college, what was the impact there for you and your team as soon as we realised lockdown was upon us?
We transitioned really well, to be honest. We just instigated sort of the OneFile VLA just 2 months prior to COVID, so we're already doing that work in terms of moving over from Canvas. The rest of the project stayed with Canvas. We've moved over to OneFile VLA because it meets the needs of our learners better. It's like one single place where you can get everything. So that was the work we were doing prior to COVID. So moving into COVID, the team were already up and running with redesigning some of our delivery models, our delivery modes, and now we're going to use the VLE to support learners. So ironically, it was quite timely for us to really go into that and divert a lot of the staff's time and energy. Some of them had lighter caseloads to sort of develop the VLE to support the learners. So that really worked really well for us. And the only other really transition was things like the use of Teams or Zoom or WhatsApp video. I suppose we've moved more to a sort of a hybrid learning environment where we're using the likes of Teams and Zoom. So we're live streaming our sessions rather than having something that's just been recorded and put on the system. That was probably the biggest change for the team, to get used to using that platform and to engage at a distance, live stream. I mean, early days we were experimenting with live streaming to carry out health and safety appraisals, for example. So that was one of our early barriers, because how do we carry on recruiting learners during COVID? And employers still wanted to take on apprentices, which was brilliant, but you've got to get around that barrier of how do you do that from a social distancing perspective? How do you do it completely from a distance? So live streaming was something we experimented with. So originally, yes, it was intended for the health and safety appraisals, but the fact I could observe a tutor on screen with a learner mowing a golf green 200 miles away was ridiculous, to be honest. But that type of technology, we've embraced that. The team have embraced it. We've used it to carry on our sign-ups, and then we've used it to inform endpoint assessment organisations, so they can look at that as one of the flexibilities, so we can A, get our learners to gateway, and B, get them through the endpoint assessment. So yeah, I would say sort of the use of the mobile technology, Zoom, the video technology aspect was probably the bit that we needed to upskill our staff on. The rest of it, they were pretty quite agile and up and running and geared for it.
Oh, fantastic. So, so you've both obviously, thank goodness, you've talked about OneFile and how that supported your delivery during this time, and you've talked about Teams and Zoom. Is there any other sort of technologies that you guys have been using?
Hi, Susanna. We use DocuSign as well, so we have all our systems and processes from the start of a learner's journey on there. So we engage with our employers via contracts, and all of the paperwork journey that we would normally do face-to-face, we've been doing remotely. So we've been signing learners up, we've been making sure we're still compliant, and that all of the documents that we have are audit ready, so that no matter what happens, we still have those processes in place. They still stand up to scrutiny.
Fantastic. And Paul, is there any other technology that you use?
I suppose from my perspective, I've mentioned about the health and safety appraisals and sort of that sign-up aspect. So we use e-forms or Ignite, whatever you want to brand it and call it. But e-forms have been absolutely brilliant. We did that work probably 8 months prior to COVID, spent a lot of time on that because we wanted to move away from doing anything that was paper-based from a sign-up perspective. So going into COVID, we already had that in place, and that was probably the best things we've ever done, to be honest, because it's allowed us from a business continuity perspective to carry on enrolling our learners. So yeah, everything's electronic. You can sign the documentation. If the employee services manager is not there, then I can take over that role, so we can share the workload at distance. So yeah, that's allowed the business to continue, be it not at the same rate, obviously, because we've got learners on furlough and some new placements have been a bit tricky, but I'd say it's allowed us to carry on at probably 10% of what we'd normally have done, which is better than nothing. And now more learners are coming off furlough, we're getting the team back out there and doing more sign-ups.
Fantastic. For those of you who just joined us, if you can make sure that you're on mute, if you're not one of the panel speakers, that'd be amazing. Please use the chat if you've got any questions or would like to make any comments. So how have the learners reacted to sort of a fully remote delivery model? Mike or Sue, do you want to start with that one?
Sorry, my camera won't. Oh, it will come on. Our learners have been incredibly positive. We've used OneFile for over, I think it's 10 years now. So every single apprentice coming into the college has a portfolio. So they're already used to using the systems. So the remote assessment side of it, they know and they're used to. Some of the learners have been familiar with the other courses options as well. So none of it was really a new style to them. It was more to do with the fact that it wasn't reinforced in a physical classroom. So where learners now have lessons on Teams, or they might have one-to-one reviews with their employer when they're furloughed, still with their skills officer or their assessor and their employer. They're now doing things remotely, but with the same system. So none of it has been particularly different for them in that way, simply the location of where they are. We've had some incredibly positive feedback from many of our learners and employers So I think the systems that we use have stood up to scrutiny during lockdown. And I think that the familiarisation they've built on rather than started using something new.
Okay. And Paul, how have your learners found it?
Really well. We've been measuring our engagement rate from day one, really. So we've used the learner statuses on OneFile, and we have a bespoke COVID-19 form on there as well. So every week we're measuring what the engagement rate is. We're up to something like 94% at the moment, which has increased during COVID, which is really good because we had 24.5% on furlough at the start. That's now down to about 14%. But the engagement rate has gone from 85 to 94 over that 3-month period, which is really good. So that's basically saying that learners are really engaging. We also measure progress against target, and ironically, that's increased 7% during COVID, which is probably a good acknowledgement of the fact that the learners are using sort of the courses, the BLE side of things, quite effectively. And that engagement and that positive progress against targets been more evident on standards rather than frameworks, which is really interesting. So yeah, they've embraced the new technology, they've embraced the use of the VLE sites, the way it maps to the learning aims. All that's been a positive aspect from the learner's point of view and from an employer's point of view as well, because obviously we've got learners on furlough, but we're still engaging with the learners. The learners are still learning and making good progress. Up until a point, obviously, you can appreciate we've got lots of practical assessments that are involved with land-based. So we're certainly covering the knowledge quite easily. And then thankfully now we're coming slowly out of COVID. We're getting around to doing a lot more of the face-to-face practicals.
Fantastic. I mean, the feedback that I've been hearing from people is the learners almost that are furloughed and not still working, they're really sort of grateful almost to have that continuity and to have something sort of formalized and, you know, set up for them to do, and that they're also feeling more resilient because they feel like they are using this time, if they are furloughed, to sort of become, you know, more well, they've got time to do some of their learning and their training during this time. Is that the kind of feedback you've been hearing from your learners?
Most definitely. We have some training sessions that we put on with our account manager from OneFile, but also with our own team. So as they're becoming more confident, they've been rolling that out. And what we have found is that the feedback that the learners are giving them is that they enjoy doing the kind of new styles of assessment that we've introduced. So the same methods, but shorter, sharper. So our construction learners, for instance, they've been doing what they call snap assessments, and they are literally 2-minute videos of whatever they choose to do. So it's upskilling them digitally, but at the same time, that adds value to their portfolio. It gives them better life skills, and it makes them feel they're still contributing to the journey of learning. And yeah, they've done a fantastic job in innovation, I think, in their own sectors. So some of them did work still, but some of them didn't. But nevertheless, they were still able to add something to their journey.
Paul, what about your learners?
Yeah, they've really improved, to be honest. One of the things that we've carried on doing during COVID is we carry out professional visits of our tutors. Our tutors are based all over England, and we deliver to that distance as well. So ordinarily we drive out, we do a full day professional visit with that tutor. It's nothing that's graded, it's more supportive. There's a lot of well-being connected to it. We engage with the employees and the learners. We've carried on doing that cycle, but we've done it over using Zoom, which is brilliant. So I can dip into any sessions, I can observe what the tutors are doing from like a formative assessment perspective with the learners. I can then interview the learner. I can then either interview the employer at the same time, or I can contact them separately. And the feedback's been brilliant. The learners have really appreciated the fact that, yes, a lot of them are on furlough, but they've got that contact with their tutor. So then scheduled visits have carried on, but just in a virtual aspect.
And have you had to sort of think about sort of, you know, the other distractions that a furloughed student might have at home? So obviously they've got sort of Netflix, they've got their games consoles. How do you overcome the other distractions that might be there for them?
Can we answer that one?
Yeah, please.
You're right, there are distractions at home, and I think we found this with sort of things like construction apprenticeships, where it's more block release, and then do we try and replicate that, but replicate it virtually? Exceptionally difficult, because like you say, learners have got their own challenges and commitments at home as well, so it's not easy to keep to that rigid timetable. So we've sort of flipped the classroom, and in the morning they'll carry on with structured lessons, and in the afternoon it's more of a breakout. I'd say the other challenge is not just the learners, it's the staff as well. I mean, we're having meetings with staff, and I can see like 5 kids in the background running riot. It's like, and they're trying to carry on. So yes, the learners have had to adapt to it, but the staff have also had to adapt to that as well, because, you know, that like myself, I'm working from home, my wife's working from home, my daughter's at college, so I'm teams working from home. We're all challenged within the house, trying to use all the devices. We're social distancing within the house, which is a bigger challenge for me. So yeah, learners is a challenge, and staff, it's a challenge as well. I think they're all overcoming it, and I think they're adapting to this current new way of working to the best that they can, and they're offsetting their working hours to accommodate that.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I mean, you talked there about the staff. How did did you have any challenges with maybe people within the colleges that were reluctant to use technology in the past, but have now realised they've got to get on board with it, and very, very quickly? And how did you overcome those? Mike and Sue?
I'll just make a quick observation, actually. When we talk about the lockdown period, and I'm one of those people, sometimes it's hard to find a home in colleges to get the understanding about what an apprenticeship is and how different that is compared to full-time. So this is probably the first time that apprentices have had an extended run of being able to engage with learning without the pressures of work on their shoulders. And I think what we've experienced as a result of that is actually work becoming less of actually, oh, I've got to get that done, as well as be busy and work, to actually an increased enjoyment around learning. So actually, hopefully, we continue to work in those veins as flexible working comes into play, and people feel actually more supported by their employers to find time to study and develop further outside of their allocated 20%. And you know, it's been really heartening when we get that feedback from those learners who've gone, do you know what? I enjoy my apprenticeship, but I'm enjoying the learning aspect of it so much more, and that's a really nice thing to come out of what's been a really challenging situation. In terms of staffing, I think there's forever been issues around hardware. We've had to work really, really hard to make sure that we've got a standard approach to hardware in this period of time. That's actually extended to learners. I can remember really in the dark days where I was duty manager here, observing social distancing and everything, ferrying a laptop to one of our EHCP learners because they just didn't have the facilities to study and were desperately keen to engage. And you're absolutely right. In terms of the variances, you've got some staff here who use IT on a daily basis, really, really comfortable in front of the camera, able to use all of the different platforms that we've engaged with in terms of that and navigate really, really well, to those that have never touched it, don't really want to touch it, and have found some really sort of significant barriers to actually doing something around that. And the challenge that we think we've presented to those high flyers as well is to find time in their diary to buddy up with other people who feel less confident. And there's no one better than that mentor peer-to-peer support activity really to bring that home. And again, you know, it fills me with great glee when I look at the quality and the innovation and the distance travelled in 12 weeks. Some of the stuff that's now being produced, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that we'd have staff here within the apprenticeship team who've picked it up and gone, actually, I want to do better and I want to do this. And again, you know, it all comes back well because it's the learners that are going, absolutely, I love it, I want to do more of it, and will inevitably mean that the future delivery will look very, very different.
Fantastic. Sorry, Sue, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, sorry, just hitting my mute.
All right. Okay. And you've all mentioned the employers. So how have the employers reacted and how have they engaged during this time? Paul?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our employers were still actively recruiting apprenticeships. They'd start that process, but we're carrying on with it, which is really good to see. So they've been quite receptive to carrying on that sign-up process and getting that learner on board as soon as possible. if I pick a good example, we've recently had one of our level 2 golf greenkeepers go for an endpoint assessment that was live streamed. So you can imagine an endpoint assessor live streaming into a workplace 200 miles away. It was the first live stream for that endpoint assessment organisation, so it was being quality assured by somebody else observing it. But it was the employer holding the camera at the other end, filming the learner doing a practical endpoint assessment for 6 hours. Now, all I can say is that is just fantastic commitment from an employer who actively wanted that learner to finish his apprenticeship and pass. So I was really keen to sort of, we'll try this. It might not work, it might work. You've got the device, but then you've got the bandwidth. You've got all the different scenarios that come into it. So that was really successful, and I think the learner came out with a distinction in the end, which was remarkable, to be honest, to live stream for such a long period of time. But that's just one example where employers are really keen to sort of work with the colleges and really support their learners. Yeah.
So, Mike, how have your employers engaged during this time?
Employers are just the most amazing group of people, and the network that we've got down here of around about 950, every single one of them stepped up to the mark and just absolutely did. And we coined this phrase. We started to talk to employers in our regular engagements about doing the right thing. And when something like a barrier in potential break in learning came up, or perhaps thinking back to that initial confusion around furlough, we're really, really comfortable at that point to strike out and be bold and say to the guys, look, whilst it catches up in terms of legislation, let's do the right thing. Let's put those emphasis on good quality learning, good engagement around reviews, and keeping everything as normal as we possibly can. The least we can ask for is that level of support that you always show them. But if you want to go over and above, please feel free to do so. And really, really important was moving away from electronic dialogue and into that world of let's just have these conversations. And the team here that are involved in maintaining that 950 business network, we're pretty much working very, very early in the day till very, very late at night to facilitate those conversations and work through their anxieties. But we had several examples of employers loaning equipment, paying for equipment, putting extra welfare checks in at their end to make sure that everything was as expected. And other than, as I say, those few break in learning, which was supported because it was those apprentices that were in the NHS sector that actually learning wasn't going to be practical during that period of time. But even that, in terms of break in learning, there was still partnership work throughout to ensure that those learners on a break in learning were still supported as well. So as ever, we know that employers are the lifeblood of what we do in apprenticeships, and we couldn't have asked for more in terms of the way they stepped up to the mark, really.
That sounds very promising. And it's fantastic that the employers are so engaged during this time as well, especially with the furloughed workers. That's absolutely amazing. So if we look sort of to the future then, what particular features on OneFile during this time have helped you during this time, and what do you think you will sort of use more of in the future? Sue, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think what we've already using has given us the foundations to build, as I said before, and I think the courses option has just absolutely taken off. The learners like it. The staff have realised that a little bit of investment at the beginning actually makes their life easier in the long run, because they can send it out to multiple learners, and they get a good feeling then about whether or not what they're feeling that the learners have learned has actually happened. We haven't got the whites of their eyes, so to speak, in a classroom, and so when you're teaching, you rely on the body language and looking at and get the feel for your learners, which we don't have at the moment, no matter how much we look at the screen. And so this is another way to check on learning, and so the courses feature has really taken off. We have a number of our sectors who also use Moodle for their framework technical certificates and their background knowledge, and they've been able to integrate elements of that through the courses as well. So it hasn't been an option of them or us type of thing. It's very much a case of pulling things through. And I think for staff as well, they've felt that being able to send out questionnaires and videos and things all through one medium means that the learners are engaging through one thing as well, so they can keep control of it. So definitely courses is here to stay and to be built on. We use a number of different statuses on our progress reviews, and I think this has allowed us to be perhaps a little even more, wider with that. So we have the furlough and break in learning and various other aspects. But our reporting has also changed as well. So we have standard reports that we have available to us every month, but we've started exploring more the different types of reports that we can access. So the review ones, the contact ones, and various other things. So staff themselves have started to use the reports more often so that they can get a handle and keep an eye on where their learners are at. So definitely those two aspects is something we're going to build on more.
Okay, fantastic. Paul, I mean, I know you use a lot of features of OneFile, but is there anything in particular that sort of stood out that you think, yeah, your team will definitely be using more of that moving forward?
Well, yeah, we've moved over to a new learning hub. So as Sue mentioned, the VLE, the courses side, is absolutely critical for us moving forward. I've talked about e-forms as well. But yeah, I'd definitely say the course of the VLE, that's been where most of our focus has been. We've sort of really moving away from a criteria-based portfolio to something that is more flexible, using the sort of the learning journal, using the VLE site. I think we've developed something like 81 VLE course sites to date. 40 of them, I think, have been developed during COVID. If I just look at SportSurf as a scheme, I think there's been something like 2,900 unique assignments to those SportSurf course sites on OneFile within the last 3 months, which is just off the scale, really. It just says that it's really worked, moving away from having really a college centre-based VLE to something that's really linked to OneFile, and the learners can access it, it maps across, it signs off progress. So yeah, definitely that, and the induction side of that was the bit that started it. We've got a really good induction course site that we use for all our apprentices, and that's been really good. That really inducts the learners, it inducts them into OneFile and British values and Prevent, you name it, it's on there. So that's the feature that's obviously going to be used more and more moving forward, without a shadow of a doubt, as we redesign a lot of our schemes away from the old versions to something that's a bit more akin to what they're going to study and work towards for the endpoint assessment.
Paul, just want to explain a little bit more for those that are on the call today about how you do the induction.
So the induction side, we have a dedicated VLE course. So first of all, we've designed a learning aim. So it's quite a complex learning aim. It's got like 4 categories in it. It follows the 3 I's in that sense. It covers everything from your initial IAG right up to career aspirations and progression. All the core values are in there, what we expect from a behaviour point of view, right down to how to use OneFile, etc. So that's quite a weighty learning aim. It's got quite a good weight percentage against it, and we expect learners to complete that within the first 6 weeks. And that really starts their journey with OneFile. So yeah, it took a lot of work getting that up and running. And obviously at the end of that, it links into the induction survey. So not only are you putting them through an induction programme, you're getting their feedback automatically at the end of the 6-week period, which has been really beneficial. So we take the feedback as to what the learners are saying, then we redevelop or enhance the learn name and the course site as we need to.
Fantastic, thank you. I just wanted to share as well, because we've had some case studies from other colleges where they've said that the announcement feature in OneFile has been really useful during lockdown. It was never designed to sort of be a motivational announcement area. It was more for functionality and sort of, please make sure you read this, or please bear in mind the college will be shut at this date, or whatever it was. But quite a few people have been sort of having, principal and deputy vice principal messages to learners in there, putting sort of motivational sort of gifts and things like that for the learners during this time. And apparently the feedback from a lot of learners, and also parents of learners apparently, has been really positive during this time. So again, it's a feature within OneFile that wasn't designed for that, but obviously during this remote working, it's sort of really been used in a way that we hadn't considered, which is fantastic. So if we so we've talked about obviously what you've done during lockdown, and obviously, you know, colleges are reopening now. What sort of changes have you made? Like, we've talked about this sort of some of the online learning. Is there anything else that you've been doing during this time that you would like, you're thinking we'll take this into the, you know, post-COVID world, because hopefully it will make us more profitable or more efficient or more engagement from the users? Sue and Mike, do you want to take that one first?
I like the words beginning with P and E there, Susanna. So that's something that we've certainly been looking at here as an organisation. Where do you start, really? I think under pressure and your hand being forced, suddenly we've done things that I don't think we would ever have had probably the belief or confidence to do. So right back in the sort of early days, mid-April, we did an induction programme with 20 learners through our work with EDF. Followed by 3 full days worth of delivery over 2 weeks, and now that is pretty much a national programme. And certainly prior to April, the plans were everybody was going to come to Exeter. So not only were we delighted that actually we could continue to deliver a high volume of starts during those sort of early lockdown period, but actually it forced our hand to look at what's feasible and what's absolutely possible now, where probably before there was a bit of nervousness and a lack of confidence in making those things happen. So that will definitely become some new era thinking in terms of moving forward. But our learner engagement, so we all know September's our hugely busy time. The run up to September is massively busy for all FE colleges, and somehow we've had to remain that level of traction with those potential applicants and also understand what types of vacancies they can potentially be moving forward. So we've morphed now into removal of the traditional open nights where we used to see 100, 150 future apprentices coming to see us, to much more online engagement strategies, which actually gives us an always on mentality. So is it good customer service to say to somebody who's perhaps leaving school, I want to sort of think about being an apprentice, come and see us in 6 weeks. Now potentially we can do it, come and see us in 6 hours. And we can start that process much more effectively and get the ball rolling much more smoothly. And I would imagine that longer term we'll see much better results of that. Still offering the face-to-face if required, and it's safe to do so. But like I've said before, at the heart of our agenda is actually that good level of customer service. There aren't many other things you can do where you'd be expected to wait for so long. So actually, it's forced us really to step up to the mark and look at things slightly differently.
Okay, fantastic. Stu, have you got anything to add to that?
No, it's fine, thank you.
Okay, Paul, what kind of things will you be doing differently moving forward?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I thought we're definitely moving into sort of something like an hybrid learning environment where we're taking a lot of that use of Zoom and Teams and that video technology and that live streaming at distance. I could see that carrying on. My team have already mentioned that in terms of actually it will cut down on travel. Like most colleges, we've had to do the viability exercise around apprenticeships and make sure we're delivering the very best quality for the money we get. And using technology like that will make us more efficient whilst maintaining something that is really beneficial to learners. So definitely that aspect. We've done a lot of work around sort of live promotional webinars using Zoom and Teams for new delivery schemes, and that'll merge into our new My Futures sites as well. So I think that'll carry on definitely. So yeah, those 2 things are the key things, and we're looking at other provision now. So there's going to be a lot of focus around traineeships in the government, and we're now looking at setting up a new trainee centre with OneFile, and getting all those learn names on there and having that as a new delivery, because that's been quite paper based to date, in fairness. Probably linked more to the learners, the sort of the neat learners, traineeship learners, but actually they're embracing the technology as good, if not better, than some of our current apprentices. So I think I can see a lot of difference with traineeships moving forward, using sort of e-portfolios, learning journals, and all that type of technology, definitely.
Okay, fantastic. Just a couple more questions, and we're going to move on to the questions from the people on the call. So if there's anything you want to ask the guys, please put it in the chat now. So Paul, if I could just ask, what would your advice be to other colleges to help their transition be as successful as Minesco's?
Transition in what sense? Over to electronic or?
Electronic, getting the whole team behind it. You know, Mike's talked about, you know, obviously some of his team, you know, wouldn't have done it if they hadn't had their hand forced. So just for a college to be, if there's anything that they're thinking about doing, what would, you know, to transition to sort of, like you say, a hybrid model, and they're not quite there yet, what would you advise?
I think it definitely takes leadership. I think it takes the backing of a senior leadership team. I think it starts right at the top, and having that sort of vision. And then if it's at the top, then it'll cascade down to the team. So definitely having the vision, having the sort of that senior leadership emphasis behind it to support that transition. As you know, I've been using technology for what, 15 years plus, right from the early days of Busby's, memo pads. We used to have 4 devices, now you can use it on 1 device. But I think from an efficiency point of view, from a quality point of view, from just getting learners through a lot quicker with a quality product, I think it makes logical sense to move over to a system like OneFile, where you can actually do everything from your delivery to your sign up, to your teacher learning, your assessment, you name it, it's all a one-stop shop, which is what Sue mentioned earlier. So yeah, definitely it's got to be driven from the top. You've got to have good vision, you've got to look at your delivery modes, your delivery models, design it correctly, your curriculum review is quite important. And then getting the team on board, like I mentioned earlier, we're quite lucky because I've got a fantastic team behind me. We're almost like a directorship on our own, and it starts right from when we take on a new member of staff. They have a right thorough induction in terms of what is OneFile, how to use OneFile. We've got a OneFile mentor. We've now got a mentor that mentors people around the use of the VLE side of things. So it's around having all them structures in place that you can develop and guide a member of the team from day one, because you know, like certainly within the land-based sector, we're taking people from industry most of the time. They've never been in education before. They've got all the skills and the industrial knowledge that we need, but we've got to turn them into fantastic teachers and upskill them. So having a thorough induction program is quite key and at the core of everything, I think.
We've just got a comment saying a top-down approach doesn't work if the exec team are not backing it. So how do you convince your exec team?
If I generally come up with an idea, I will pitch it, but I will put a lot of thought, research and process behind anything that I pitch and put forward to make sure I've got a sound case to put forward to anybody. I've never, in furthest, I've never really had that battle with my exec team. I sit on the senior management team anyway, and we've got a fantastic supportive college right down, not just the senior leadership team, but the governors as well are right behind our delivery models. So I appreciate that it's difficult within some colleges, but you just can't give up. You've got to really persevere. You've got to really argue your corner, come up with a really valid case as to why you want to go down that avenue, and you've got to stick with it. And like I've always said, you know, bring examples to the table, you know, engage with other colleges and providers. I've seen so much of that engagement over the past 3.5 months with colleges and providers and networks coming together. It's been brilliant. So look to your peers, get help and support on your advice, and signpost your exec team to other people who can give them that information as well.
So what would you put in that case? Yes, you'd reference other colleges that have done something similar. So what else would you include in that business case?
What's the benefit? What's the benefit to the learner at the end of the day? So really make it learner-centred. I think that's quite key. And that's any business case I put forward, the learner's always at the centre of what we do. So really justify how this is really going to benefit the learner, how's it going to benefit the employer, and how's it going to benefit the sector, you know, because all them 3 things are quite core.
Yeah, okay, great. So Mike and Sue, what advice would you give any colleges on the call today moving forward?
I agree with everything Paul said, and I think that sometimes in the FE world, it's hard for apprenticeships to get its place, and for colleges to look at things that are very, very different for apprenticeships than it is their full-time programme. And again, it's back to understanding now. We're not making changes sometimes because we're fearful, or we're not making changes because actually we just don't understand the differences. But now we've just come out of this period of 3 hard, really challenging months where actually we've proved a number of these initiatives have now worked. So there's no better time really in terms of that strategic change to actually land it and go, look, you know, here's what we've done, here's the benefits, here's the success, and actually now is a time where actually we can change things for the better, and move those things forward. Now, what we'll always use in that instance is 3 strategies, I suppose. One is to get the employer feedback as well, to present that and show actually the benefits that we brought forward. Include the learner feedback as well, because again, you'll find that now it should be quite widespread. There should be a number of examples where learners have said, you know, I've really enjoyed the way that this has worked, and in terms of something like a blended learning approach, you'll find oodles of evidence that says actually this is the right thing to do. And then also look at those key benefits. So, you know, we're talking now about, we've all got pressures on our estates and we'll have moving forward, actually offer up that if we can reduce, you know, engagement on a college on a 50-50 basis, and we're freeing up resources for other aspects of and other faculties, etc., then, you know, we're making that contribution to the college in this new era, and pushing that forward. But I think, you know, the lovely platform we've now got is a period of proof of concept, and quickly scribble down what those key successes are and work out whether they are able to be maintained moving forward, and if you want them to be maintained forward, and then start that process of engaging across your executive team to get that support really.
Fantastic. I think someone from MySco's just commented saying MySco governors certainly are behind the innovation, and the chair is actually on this event, so that is fantastic to to hear. It shows how committed they are, which is absolutely fantastic. Just going back to you both about, do you both interview on the use of technology when you are taking on new members of staff and practitioners? Paul?
In terms of, do we talk about technology during the interview process?
Yeah, and their willingness to embrace it when you're taking.
Yeah, it tends to. I'd like to say we have some default questions, but it tends to be that usually with something around technology enhanced learning will be a standard question on most of that anyway, and that's just really to get around the thought process on it, because some people might not have had any experience of using technology, so it sort of just breaks that cycle a little bit. So definitely, and sometimes, I mean, more recently, we've been carrying out interviews using the technology. So we've got no chats from day one. So we've been using Teams and Zoom. I think last week it even went down to WhatsApp video. So even to carry out interviews, because we're still recruiting staff at this point, then we've been using that technology. So if they can embrace it for an interview process, I'm pretty sure they can use it when they get the job.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, Mike, is that something that you interview on as well?
Yeah, I think there's nothing more frustrating than spending hours and hours of time and resource interviewing and then actually finding that the skill set isn't quite right. Yeah. So over the last, I'd say 18 months or so, we've started to introduce practical tasks into the interview process. And even in the lockdown period, whilst we have been interviewing, those tasks have been completed remotely. And it's really interesting at times to see those individuals that undersell their capabilities and can produce some amazing stuff. And there's one or two that oversell their capabilities and don't produce quite what we want, but it absolutely separates out those that can and those that can't. And certainly, you know, where we want high quality delivery and high quality engagement, that practical nature really separates that out. And as I say, we've been delighted with it. I still think there's more to do. I think we here have an agenda where we want all of our staff to be fully, you know, digital champions, etc. But sometimes we're in our sort of reach to do the absolute best and hit the dizzy heights. We're actually forgetting some of the core skills. So there's a bit of work now going on sort of around the older fashioned type training to support actually some of the skills we probably assume everyone's got. So bit of the back to basics, but then also, and you know, I'm a great advocate of it, if you've got people in your team, regardless of level, and they're excited and they champion the use of resources such as this, then push them to the front because they're brilliant figureheads and they bring everybody else along for the ride. And it just fills me with joy to see some of the stuff they're doing.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so if we just moved on, we've just got a few questions so far, unless anybody posts anything new. So somebody said, we've talked about Teams and Zoom. Does anybody use Google Hangouts? Do any of you guys use Google Hangouts?
Not one that we've used. It is predominantly Teams or Zoom.
Paul, do you use Google Hangouts at all?
Not to my knowledge, but to be honest, I've left the work-based team to utilise whatever they feel is fit for purpose. So we've not really dictated that you have to use Teams or you have to use Zoom. They may have used Google Hangouts, but to my knowledge, it tends to be Teams and Zoom. Okay, fantastic. So just for those of you on the call that actually use, we're actually releasing, I think Chris, Adam's just posted on the group chat. We're actually got a release this week on Thursday on OneFile, an official Microsoft Teams integration. We did a Pendo survey. I don't know if you saw some of you would have seen the pop-up survey that came on within the software asking what you guys use, and Teams was actually significantly more than Zoom, hence why we've gone for the Teams one first, but we should be following up with Zoom afterwards. But that's why it's so important. If you do see these questionnaires pop up on OneFile, that's where we take some of our research from, and it was about 300% more said they were using Teams, hence why we went with that one first. So yeah, just to let you know, those of you that do use Teams, that will be released on Thursday. The other question that was asked was, how do you, with learners that are using work technology to access OneFile, once they're at home and maybe they've only got a mobile phone with limited data packages, is there anything that you guys work with them? Yeah, so we've had some of our learners, certainly any learners LLDD or EHCP plans, then there have been occasions where we've supplied the technology or even the broadband connection as well. So any barriers like that we come across, reported and dealt with, and we support the learners with whatever technology we need to get to them, because it's, like I said, without that then they can't continue learning, so it's quite key.
And likewise, we sort of followed suit and drained every laptop bank we could find in a mad dash pre-lockdown and distributed them out. But one of the key things that's come out of it in terms of change of approach is, as part of the sort of application and interview process, is we're now auditing what technology people have, so that next time if there was to be a lockdown, we can clearly start looking at those that we class as high risk, because they may have a limited amount of data, or they might not have the facilities to do it. Whereas I think early days it was very much a trial and error, and we sort of had to work our way through it. It was probably, sadly, those that shout loudest probably got better service than those who hid in the shadows a bit, who didn't quite have the confidence to come on board and go, I don't have it. And again, you know, it's back to that partnership ethos of sharing some of those challenges with the employers, who again stepped up to the mark and helped in terms of the hardware and occasionally some support around data, but very much a case of, you know, let's stick our heads together and see what we can come up with as an answer. And as I say, hopefully, fingers crossed, we seem to resolve all the problems that came our way.
Fantastic, thank you. Just a couple more questions that have come up. So the integration is going onto the app. We're just looking at the strategy for the app at the moment, because it's not necessarily a light version of what you can. Everybody wants to be able to do everything on the app, so we're just looking at how much we can put on that, or whether we need to have sort of separate development going on there. Skype integration, there is currently under, I think it's under the profile area, the student can put their Skype details in, and you can click on that. That's been there for a long time. You can click on that and that will automatically call the learner. All the questions are coming through thick and fast now. Teams integration, so you'll be able to book the meeting within OneFile, and obviously integrate that, use that integration there. Let's have a look. Has anyone found that the number of systems that you're using an issue. So whereas you're using OneFile, then you might be using Moodle and maybe something else for something else. So they're just saying that at their college, they don't use the integrated VLE, so they use Moodle as well. But it can affect the student experience. Do you have any? Oh, and somebody's just said that's the part of the reason why we moved to OneFile VLE. Yeah, that's one answer. But for you guys on the call, is there anything that you can suggest there to help that?
I couldn't agree more with that comment. Where you've got some of your sort of traditional college-based courses that make up the technical certificate, they will inevitably be on a different system until you start having that conversation. And again, we're very used to as a sector just getting on with what we know. But actually, when you sit down and explore the benefits with the tutors and the faculty leads and say, look, you know, we appreciate this is the module that you're using, whatever that platform might be, but here it can be replicated, or we can build a bridge into that for you. The sort of hesitance disappears, because actually you can show them some benefits and some time savers. But I do recognise, you know, that you're not always pushing on an open door when it comes to that transition programme. But, you know, I can only testify that it's far better to have them in one place rather than split over multiples. And again, we use the customer experience as the reason why. You know, we wouldn't want to be banking with somebody where we manage our income on one element and our outgo and we log on and do it somewhere else. So it's trying to bring people up to speed in terms of that sort of what I'd say is today's thinking, not yesterday's sort of mindset around where these things sit, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Paul, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think wherever possible, then we'll create some kind of data bridge that will link the two together. A good example would be, you know, we code things on OneFile, but then some of the centre-based apprenticeships might use Pro Monitor for some things. So anything like that, we'll work through the process and see the best approach. And then we'll utilise other systems like Power BI. So we use Power BI a lot to extract data from OneFile and put onto a dashboard. But that's the same process that will work across college anyway. So I've not come across any real barriers, to be honest.
Okay, right, thank you very much. So just before we finish, I would love to thank Paul, Mike and Sue for joining us today. I hope the people on the call have found that useful. We will share the video with you all as well, so you're more than welcome to share that with any of your teams. So obviously the Teams integration is coming soon this week, which is fantastic. But we also have a new product that's coming out, which I'm just going to share. Okay, can you all see that? Paul or Mike, can you say yes if you can see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, lovely. So coming at the end of this month, we've got our RPL funding calculator. So basically it will ensure you've got the right learner on the right course at the right price. You'll be able to input the delivery funding for the knowledge, skills and behaviours part of the apprenticeship standard, and the cost to you, fixed and variable costs. And what the learner will then be able to do before you sign them up is they'll be able to go through the knowledge, skills and behaviour, use a scorecard, similar to the one that you're using in the Learning Hub, those of you that are already doing so, and they'll be able to say what they already know and provide some evidence for that. And then in the background, what the calculator will do is then readjust the funding, the maximum funding band in association with how much that would have cost the college to deliver that part of the funding. And obviously that's all part, you know, in communication and conversation with the training provider or the college and the employer. But what it will also do is you'll also be able to put the minimum viable band that you'll be able to deliver that out. So if it's a £27,000 programme and it drops to below £22,000 funding because they've got so much prior knowledge, it will highlight to whoever's doing the enrolment that that is dropping below a profitable amount. And then obviously it's all available with for ESFA audit as well. So when they say, how are you adjusting the funding for RPL, you'll be able to show them the calculator as evidence. There's a link there if anybody is interested. We've got about 120 providers actually that are already signed up to sort of look at being early adopters of this. And we'll send the link out anyway in a follow-up email after this. So if anybody is interested in being in the first phase of colleges and providers that will be using this product, please let us know. Right, I'm just going to unshare my screen. So thanks again for everybody that's attended. Like I said, I really hope you found it useful today. It was I always found it insightful talking to Mike and Paul and Sue. Their innovation and their passion for the sector obviously shines through. So thank you so much to the three of you, and thank you to everybody that's attended. If there's any other questions that you've got, I'm sure if you fire them through, the three of them would be more than happy to answer them afterwards. And like I say, I'll be following up with a follow-up email with a link to the video if you need to share that with any of your colleagues or push it up to your exec team to get them on board. So thank you very, very much, everybody. Hope to speak to you all soon. Bye.